The 18 to 40 age group in the UK largely says that they wouldn't fight even if our country was under existential threat. And I think there's several reasons for that. One, of course, is that we have been, as I said earlier, demoralized as a country. If you've been told your country is rotten, why would you lay down your life for it? I mean, it would be ridiculous. So I think that the demoralization and the attack on ourselves, our past, our culture, our history, can be said to have some very serious effects. But the good news is that I had heard for years in Israel a similar thing. And now they have conscription, of course, and young people go into the army and they serve their army service and then are in reserves and so on. So it's different. People who had fought in the wars when Israel was invaded in 1967, then again when Israel was invaded in 1973, remember October the 7th happened on the 50th anniversary of the Yom Kippur surprise attack on Israel. The one thing about the jihadists, they're very, very keen on anniversaries.
Has the West bred a generation of cowards? Douglas Murray throws down the gauntlet, contrasting the heroic defiance of Israelis and Ukrainians with Western youth drowning in a pathetic Olympics of victimhood. While our future leaders are taught to apologise for their existence, others are fighting for theirs. Murray asks the brutal question, when the time comes, will anyone be left to defend the kingdom at all?
I was with a unit in the zone between the Ukrainian and Russian front lines the other week in Ukraine, whilst they were launching drones against the Russian lines, which were about 1.5 kilometers away from us. And when you see these young Ukrainian men and women, who have families and sometimes 20 kilometers, 30 kilometers behind where we were. They're all doing the sort of jobs that we do or our friends do or people we know do. And here they are in uniform because their country's been invaded and they're not willing to see that happen. And so they fight. It's the same with the young generation in Israel. My belief has always been that those of us who grew up in the wake of World War II always had this question in our heads, which was we knew the stories from our parents, grandparents, of what they had done in the 1930s and 40s to stop Hitlerian fascism. And there was always this question that was on all of our minds, I think. It was sort of in our hearts as well, which was,
could we do it?
Could we do it? And the further you come away from conflict, the more you inevitably sort of ask yourself that question, then doubt it. And I give examples in the book of horrific opinion polls, which have been carried out in the UK and the US in the last few years, asking if young Americans or young Brits would be willing to stand and fight if their country was invaded, if our country was invaded in this way. And the results are not good.
They say no.
They mainly say no, yeah. Particularly people in the age that our forebears went off to fight in 1914-18 and 1939-45, which was, 18 to 40, pretty much.
Douglas Murray sees Ukrainians and Israelis fighting for survival and asks the million-dollar question, could our youth do the same? He cites polls showing Western kids would rather flee than fight. Only 55% of Americans would stay and defend their nation. While they defend their homelands with blood and bone, have we bred a generation of cowards ready to just hand over the keys to the kingdom?
The 18 to 40 age group in the UK largely says that they wouldn't fight even if our country was under existential threat. And I think there's several reasons for that. One, of course, is that we have been, as I said earlier, demoralized as a country. If you've been told your country is rotten, why would you lay down your life for it? I mean, it would be ridiculous. So I think that the demoralization and the attack on ourselves, our past, our culture, our history, can be said to have some very serious effects. But the good news is that I had heard for years in Israel a similar thing. And now they have conscription, of course, and young people go into the army and they serve their army service and then are in reserves and so on. So it's different. People who had fought in the wars when Israel was invaded in 1967, then again when Israel was invaded in 1973, remember October the 7th happened on the 50th anniversary of the Yom Kippur surprise attack on Israel. The one thing about the jihadists, they're very, very keen on anniversaries. So it was one of many failings that I identify in the book on the Israeli side. Again, it's worth pointing out, I'm very critical of where the Israelis made mistakes on the 7th. I've been deeply moved by the fact that the younger generation in Israel, the people I've seen on the front lines and much more, they are of the generation whose elders thought they'd become weak,
decadent,
too liberal, decadent, just wanted to party in Tel Aviv, just wanted to be on TikTok and Instagram. And I've been enormously encouraged by the fact that these remarkable young men and women have risen to the moment and shown themselves to be magnificent warriors, absolute warriors, fighters, and not crucially with hate in their hearts, but with a knowledge of what they're fighting for. They know what they're defending. They're defending their country, their people, their families, their faith, their tradition.
Douglas Murray scoffs at the West's pathetic self-loathing. If you teach your kids their country is garbage, why would they fight for it? No wonder patriotism is in the toilet, with only 38% of Americans extremely proud of their nation. Israeli elders feared their youth were just soft Tel Aviv partygoers. But when faced with Hamas's medieval butchery on October 7th, these soft kids became lions, defending everything they love.
Their way of life after it's been so barbarously attacked. And one of the questions I pose, and I hope answer in the book, but one of the questions I suppose I'll leave you with is this thing that connects a lot of what I've written about in my life essentially comes down to this question of, would we be willing to take our own side in an argument ever? And much of the intellectual rot I've written about in my career and much of the thought rot I've written about, that is the question you have, which is, would we be able to think our way out of that if a moment of trial came? Or would we stay indulging in this culture of boring victimhood and oppressor oppressed, the person who can claim to be most victimized wins, the biggest minority wins, and so on? Do we want to be like that, which Western men in particular have been told they should play in? It's also that. It's part of the war on masculinity, the dampen it down, toxic masculinity. Can't we just be more empathetic and take on various presumed female traits? Can't we realize that we've been the bad guys, etc., etc.? You can do that if you want, but it's a total loser's game. And I would like, instead of blaming the young Israelis who have been so heroic in my observation in the last 18 months, I'd like to think instead of blaming them, people should emulate them. They've been remarkable, and we'd be so lucky as to produce people like that.
Douglas Murray, thanks for your time today.
It's a great pleasure.
That was Douglas Murray, someone who is currently all over a lot of people's social media feeds. He's arguing and talking a lot about Israel, a lot of very contentious, difficult topics, and many people might be coming into contact with him for the first time at the moment. So I thought it was interesting to remind people of his history, and rather than being just a one-issue person, look back at how he formed the worldview he now espouses.
Douglas Murray slams the West's grotesque obsession with victimhood, a woke Olympics of self-hatred that castrates men and paralyses our will to survive. He calls it a loser's game, and he's right. While our youth are taught to apologise for their existence, Israeli kids are fighting for theirs. Why emulate heroes when you can cry about being oppressed from your iPhone? So, any thoughts on what Douglas Murray just discussed? Share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so that you never miss any of our future debates.